Hello. Before I dive into sharing my experiences about the PhD grind, I must warn you that the PhD experience, including the application process, is quite subjective to the individual. Spoiler alert, if you are looking for an answer, a universal answer that is, which guarantees your application to get selected, I'm sorry to say I don't know. Maybe no one knows. Maybe at the end of the day, saying an honest I don't know qualifies you to pursue research which a PhD demands. You'll have to check that out for yourself. I'm Rachit, and I recently started as a student in the Complex Networks and Systems PhD program at Indiana University in Bloomington. Not so long ago, I graduated with degrees in physics and mechanical engineering from BITS Pilani. Following that, I was a teaching fellow at Ashoka University in the physics department. In hindsight, it seems like much simpler times given all of us are now adjusting to a new normal brought in by the pandemic. Anyway, this is just to point out that my background, though decently diverse, is still limited to STEM fields. I know that there are other episodes out there in the series which are more tailored to the other end of the academic world. I suggest you check them out too. That being said, let's begin. A PhD is your brainchild. Let that settle in for a moment, for whatever is to follow, I think, is based on this. An inherent assumption that people have about a PhD is that it leads you to a long-term career in academia only. This is only partially true and can even be misleading. Better put, a PhD is what you make out of it. If you want a career outside academia, say in the corporate world or as a professional athlete, something as unique as a professional athlete, PhD programs which can be tailored towards this goal exist. Additionally, if you do not know what you want to do after your PhD, this is okay too. Some of us just like to pursue a PhD just for the intellectual curiosity, I guess. Anyway, this shouldn't stop you from applying to a PhD. After all, the time it demands might bring in changes to the general trajectory you picture your life taking at the moment. Before you start with your application process, it is important that you know your options. The PhD process is different in different parts of the world. Going by countries, the US system is quite different from its Western and Northern European counterparts, which is again different from systems in countries like Canada or even in India for that matter. Some of these differences are in the eligibility criteria, application process, funding, the duration and flexibilities of the program, and the requirements one needs to fulfill in order to earn a PhD. US, for example, usually does not require you to have a master's degree in order to be eligible to apply for their programs. However, such programs tend to compensate for this by offering a longer PhD program, usually spanning across 5 years and having a non-negligible portion of coursework, which takes up your first year or two. You might even be eligible to receive a master's degree on the way to your PhD. This is again specific to the program and the university. On the other hand, countries in Western Europe might require you to have a master's degree, which is in the relevant field and banks on this training to judge your ability to start research from day one. So they expect you to start research from day one. Another key difference is the concept of research rotations, common but not limited to the US programs. Research rotations offer you a chance to work with multiple different advisors, groups, or labs on many projects before you go ahead and decide who you want your PhD advisor to be and who you want the members of your committee to be. By committee, I mean the dissertation committee. Anyway, European applications are generally driven by a supervisor-centered approach. By this, I mean that the principal investigators or the heads of the labs publicize openings in their groups, usually when they have the funds to support it. Keep in mind that these funds are usually tied to a project, so not only will you have to commit to a supervisor before having worked with them, but you might also have to commit to certain goals or methods of a project. Of course, the kind of flexibility you still have is open to discussion with your supervisor or with the funding agency for that matter. In places like the US, Canada, or even in India, PhD applications follow an annual cycle just like the undergraduate admission cycle you might be familiar with. While benefits like an annual pay raise, parental leave, extended benefits like health insurance for dependents are popular in European countries, such benefits might not be the norm elsewhere. Funding isn't guaranteed in all PhD programs either. I know of programs in the UK which require you to arrange for your own funding, but do assist you in finding relevant scholarships. Programs in North America, on the other hand, offer a stipend tied to teaching or research assistantships, and this can support you through your PhD studies. It is my general advice to seek a PhD program which covers your tuition fees, provides you some sort of health insurance, and also pays you a stipend or salary on top of that to sustain yourself and be financially independent. This is certainly possible and what most PhD applicants seek. Be very aware of the fact that there unfortunately exists a major divide between international and domestic students when it comes to the financial aspect of doing a PhD. That being said, there are a number of scholarships and fellowships out there which can support the research you are interested in. The benefits of getting one of this is that you then might not have to work as a teaching assistant or take up a pre-existing project. Advisors are generally willing to support candidates in their application to such scholarships. Make sure you speak to your supervisors or your potential supervisors about this. To summarize, once you are aware that such differences exist, instead of looking at the programs out there and majorly adopting your interests to it, I suggest you first evaluate where you stand as an individual, what kind of lifestyle you'd want to have in the years during your PhD, like do you have a family to support or things like that. What do you want a PhD to do for you? And then look into programs out there which tailor to these needs. For example, I for one know for a fact that I'm not comfortable in a place which does not allow me to continue playing the sport of tennis. So no matter how universally acknowledged a program was or still is, if I couldn't continue playing the sport, I didn't bother applying to that program. So you guys might have preferences of your own, including the political climate of certain countries, and it's better you check that out beforehand and see if you still want to apply to those places. This brings me to the next topic of choosing an institute, a program, and a supervisor for your PhD journey. In a broad sense, my take would be to pay more attention to the program or your project and a supervisor than to the tag or some sort of global ranking given to the university or an institute by an external agency. So yeah, if I have to categorize it, I would say give most importance to your project and the supervisor than anything else. Generally, the parameters used to rank a university might be limited to certain schools and departments and might not directly reflect the status of your program. Consider paying attention to added benefits like access to sports facilities or student clubs, which might be lost when applying to a standalone research institute or private labs as opposed to a university. When it comes to choosing a supervisor, remember that a great scientist or researcher may not necessarily have a mentoring style which suits you. Given that no one in the world, not even your supervisor, would know the answers to the questions you chased during your PhD, having a mentor to guide you through the quote-unquote dark times of your PhD is key. Gosh, I'm making it sound very dark. Anyway, in addition to this, it is important to know what stage of your professional career your supervisor is at. Someone who is an assistant professor, meaning someone who's just entered, the gig of supervising, is bound to have different professional goals than someone who is a full professor or who is tenured for that matter. This also affects their expectations of you and how much of handholding they are willing to offer. Make sure you discuss these things in detail beforehand. It is a two-way street after all, and do respect and understand that your supervisor is human. Kindness and honesty do go a long way. Diving into the specifics of an application, in general, you would need a statement of purpose, a few letters of recommendation, and a CV, and of course, lots of money for application fees and sending in your scores and transcripts and whatnot. However, some universities which previously required your GRE or TOEFL scores are kind of doing away with this requirement starting this year. Thankfully, this trend is picking up, and you'll realize why when you dig deeper. Given this changing trend, I suggest you write to the program administrators beforehand, well in time, and ask them about the GRE and TOEFL requirements, and you might be able to save a fair amount of money. Additionally, you might not have to send in hard copies of your transcripts unless you have received and accepted an offer of admission. Make sure you verify such information with the program administration if it is not clear to you from the application. Some applications require you to contact supervisors beforehand, while some don't. Networking, nevertheless, goes a long way, but make sure you don't force your presence into a potential supervisor schedule, especially if it is in the last minute. Don't be a suck up, basically. When it comes to your SOP, do read the fine print of each application to understand what it is that is asked. Some explicitly require you to talk about your past work, while some prefer that you leave that to your CV and focus on what kind of research you want to do in the future. Try not to be overtly candid in the way that you write about an epiphany you must have had when you were inebriated, or if that is indeed the way you actually decided to do a PhD, there is certainly a better way to frame it. At the same time, an extreme amount of formality is usually not expected. Be honest and do not lie about who you are. This will definitely come back to bite you. Please don't copy your SOP. It reflects poorly of who you are, and believe me, the academic community is quite well knit and word spreads. I personally focused a lot on what aspects of the program suits my interests and how I can contribute to the ongoing research given my background. And mainly because I was interested in interdisciplinary work, I was able to connect dots between a lot of different fields I'm interested in to get myself into the program. That being said, I didn't hesitate to mention the topics which I am not well versed with or the skills I lack. After all, you wouldn't need a PhD if you knew everything beforehand. Put yourself in the shoes of the reviewer and ask yourself, can the same SOP be submitted to a different program with just a few minor changes? If the answer is no, give yourself a pat on the back, because I guess you would have done a good job by then. Remember that there are other parties involved in making your application complete. By this, I mean your recommenders. Give them much more than a month's notice. Your recommender might need from you your CV or few details about the program, or it can be as simple as them requesting you to send them weekly reminders. Follow up on this and make it easy for them. Little things like sharing a Google Doc with pointers about upcoming deadlines and other necessary details go a long way in making their job easier. It ought to serve as a one-stop document which they can keep track of instead of having to scan through their overflowing inbox searching for some email you must have sent 6 months ago. Lastly, remember that a good application is a completed application. Stop assuming that you don't have the knowledge or resources or the publications to start your application, and stop trying to change the thickness of a line in your CV by a millimeter or so, which no one is going to notice. When is the right time to start all of this? Yesterday is what a senior of mine told me when I was back at BITS asking him the same question. So stop procrastinating and start yesterday. Having been through the process myself, I know that luck plays a non-negligible aspect in your selection. You might have checked in all the boxes and still get rejected for reasons beyond your imagination. Do not assume that this means you're not qualified to pursue a PhD. As long as you genuinely enjoy it, it isn't a bad idea to keep trying and to keep chasing it. Don't hesitate to reach out to me for a chat. I wish you the best and, of course, lots of luck. Bye-bye.